The sun had barely crested the horizon when Kaito rode into the province's capital city. The silence that greeted him was oppressive, a heavy blanket of fear and uncertainty that clung to every building, every person. He dismounted his horse, surveying the empty streets with a mixture of sadness and weariness. It had been months since he had last seen this place bustling with life. Months since he had witnessed the joy and hope in the eyes of its people. But those were different times, before the war's tyranny had consumed everything. Kaito's gaze drifted to the city gate, where the familiar silhouette of his former nemesis, Lord Rider, once stood watchful and cruel. Now, only a few scattered guards remained, their eyes cast downward in defeat. The once imposing structure lay battered and worn, its gates hanging crookedly from rusted hinges. As he walked through the city, Kaito noticed subtle changes. The streets were cleaner, the buildings less damaged than before. But beneath the surface, a different kind of decay had taken hold. Hope had given way to despair, and desperation hung in the air like a miasma. He stopped at the city square, where the people's struggles had begun. A small group of survivors huddled together, their faces etched with worry and fear. They parted to reveal a makeshift shrine, surrounded by candles and offerings. Kaito recognized the symbol of the province's stylized lotus flower, representing resilience and rebirth. A soft voice called out from the shadows, "Kaito-san." A young woman emerged, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. She approached him with hesitant steps, her hands clasped together as if praying. "You're back." Kaito nodded, his expression a mixture of sadness and determination. "I have returned to help however I can." He glanced around the city, taking in the devastation. "What's happening here?" The woman's gaze darted nervously toward the surrounding buildings before returning to him. "Lord Rider is gone," she whispered. "But his followers, the Regent, they are still out there seeking revenge." Her voice dropped to a mere whisper. "They say you are the only one who can stop them." Kaito's jaw clenched in response. He had faced those very men before, and he knew their methods were brutal and merciless. But he also remembered the people's hope, their resilience, and his own role in inspiring it. As he looked around at the ravaged city, Kaito felt a surge of responsibility wash over him. The province's struggle had only just begun, but he knew one thing: he would not abandon this place again. He would stand with its people, no matter the cost. The woman's eyes searched his face, as if seeking reassurance. "You're still our hope, Kaito-san," she said softly. "Please stay and help us rebuild." Kaito took a deep breath, the weight of his decision settling upon him like a mantle. He would not abandon this place again. He would stand with its people, no matter the cost. With a resolute nod, he accepted their plea, knowing that one blade had won their freedom, but it was up to him to decide if it was sharp enough to defend it now. Kaito's decision made, he turned his attention to the city's lair, taking stock of the damage and assessing the situation. The woman, whose name he still didn't know, watched him with a mixture of hope and trepidation. He could almost hear her thoughts: will this wandering samurai truly stay and help us? Or will he disappear again, leaving us to fend for ourselves? As Kaito surveyed the city, his gaze fell upon the central square, where Lord Rider's statue once stood. Now it lay shattered on the ground, a testament to the rebellion's success. The people had risen up against their oppressor, and though the cost was high, they were finally free. But freedom came with its own set of challenges. Neighboring lords and warlords began to circle the province like vultures, sensing weakness and opportunity. They would stop at nothing to claim this newly leaderless land for themselves. Kaito knew that he had to act quickly to prevent the collapse of the rebellion's hard-won gains. The woman approached him, her eyes pleading. "Please, Kaito-san, you must speak with the other survivors. We need to decide how to move forward and protect our people." She glanced around nervously, as if fearing they would be overheard by those who sought to do them harm. Kaito nodded, his mind racing with the tasks ahead. He knew that he couldn't tackle everything alone, but nor could he rely solely on the rebels' leadership, which was still in disarray after Rider's fall. Someone had to bring the people together and provide direction during this chaotic period. As they walked through the city, Kaito met with various survivors, listening to their stories and assessing their skills. There were the young warriors who had fought alongside him against Lord Ryder, the merchants and traders who had suffered greatly under his rule, and the farmers and villagers who had been forced to adapt to the changing tides of war. Together, they began to forge a new path forward, one that would balance individual needs with the greater good. Kaito worked tirelessly to mediate disputes, negotiate with neighboring lords, and rally the people against the common threats that loomed on every horizon. One such threat was the Rebellion, Lord Ryder's former followers, who were determined to avenge their leader's death. They were led by a ruthless warrior named Akane, who had lost her own brother in the rebellion. Her grief and anger had twisted her into a force of nature, driven solely by a desire for revenge. As Kaito navigated this treacherous landscape, he found himself facing off against Akane's followers more frequently than he would have liked. Their battles were brutal and intense, with neither side giving quarter. Yet, despite the danger, Kaito refused to back down, knowing that the people's freedom was at stake. In the midst of these struggles, Kaito began to realize that his decision to stay in the province had not been solely about helping the rebels. He had also returned for personal reasons, to make amends for his past mistakes and find a sense of belonging among these people he had grown to care for. As the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, Kaito's bond with the people grew stronger. They began to look up to him as a symbol of hope and resilience, just as they had during the rebellion. And though the road ahead would be long and arduous, he knew that he was no longer alone in this struggle. The woman who had first welcomed him back, her name was Emiko, Kaito discovered stood by his side throughout it all, offering counsel and support whenever he needed it. Together, they faced the challenges of rebuilding a war-torn city, while also fending off the threats from without. In this fragile new world, Kaito found himself drawn into the hearts of those around him. He began to understand that being a leader wasn't just about wielding power, commanding respect. It was about serving and protecting others, even when it seemed impossible. And though he still wore the mantle of a wandering samurai, his heart now belonged to this province, its people, and their shared struggle for a brighter future. As Kaito walked through the city streets, Emiko by his side, he couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and purpose. The people they had once fought alongside now looked to him as a leader, seeking guidance and protection in this new era of freedom. It was a far cry from the days when he wandered the countryside, a lone samurai with no particular place to call home. The city itself was still reeling from the effects of war. Buildings lay in ruins, markets were scarce, and the once thriving streets now felt empty and desolate. But amidst the destruction, Kaito saw glimmers of hope. The people were resilient, determined to rebuild their lives and their community. As they walked, Emiko pointed out areas where work was being done to repair damaged buildings and clear debris. Kaito nodded along, listening intently as she spoke about the progress being made. He knew that rebuilding a city wouldn't be easy, but with people like Emiko leading the charge, he had faith that it could be done. Their conversation turned to the matter of security, and Kaito's thoughts turned to the neighboring lords who were no doubt watching them from afar. He knew that they would stop at nothing to claim this land for themselves, just as they had during the war. "We need to strengthen our defenses," Kaito said, his mind racing with strategies and tactics. "We can't let these opportunists take advantage of us." Emiko nodded in agreement, her eyes flashing with determination. "I've been thinking along those lines too. We need to fortify the city walls, increase patrols, and make sure our people are prepared to defend themselves if necessary." Kaito smiled, impressed by Emiko's grasp of the situation. He knew that she had always been a natural leader, but he was also proud to see her taking on more responsibility in this new era. As they continued their tour of the city, Kaito couldn't help but feel grateful for the chance to make amends for his past mistakes. Being a wandering samurai had given him little sense of purpose or belonging. It was only when he found himself among these people that he felt like he had finally found where he belonged. The days passed quickly as Kaito and Emiko worked tirelessly to rebuild the city. They faced setbacks and challenges along the way, but through it all, their bond grew stronger. The people began to look up to them as a symbol of hope and resilience, just as they had during the rebellion. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Kaito found himself standing on the city walls, looking out over the ruins of what once was. He felt a sense of melancholy wash over him, knowing that the road ahead would be long and arduous. But he also knew that he wasn't alone in this struggle. Emiko stood beside him, her eyes scanning the horizon as if searching for something or someone. Kaito reached out and took her hand, feeling a spark of electricity run through his fingers. "What's on your mind?" he asked, looking down at her. Emiko turned to him, her expression serious. "I was just thinking about our future," she said. "About what we want to build here." Kaito's grip on her hand tightened. "What do you mean?" "I mean that we've been given a second chance," Emiko said. "A chance to rebuild, to create something new and beautiful from the ashes of war. But it won't be easy. We'll face challenges, setbacks, and doubts along the way." Kaito nodded, his heart heavy with the weight of her words. He knew that she was right, building a future wasn't going to be easy. But he also knew that they weren't alone in this struggle. "I think we can do it," Kaito said, looking down at Emiko. "Together, I think we can build something truly special." Emiko smiled, her eyes shining with determination. "I think you're right," she said. "And together, we'll make sure that our people are protected and defended against any threats that may come their way." As the sun dipped below the horizon, Kaito felt a sense of peace settle over him. He knew that he had found his place in this world, and that with Emiko by his side, he was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As the days passed, the wandering samurai's reputation grew, and people began to whisper about the hero who had freed their province from tyranny. Kaito knew that he couldn't keep his identity hidden forever, but for now, it was a secret he kept close to his chest. Emiko and Kaito worked tirelessly to rebuild the province, using their unique skills to bring order and stability to the war-torn land. Emiko's knowledge of medicine and healing helped her tend to the wounded, while Kaito used his martial arts training to train a group of young warriors who would become the province's new defense force. As they worked, Kaito couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and responsibility. He had always been a solitary figure, wandering from place to place with no fixed abode or purpose. But now he felt like he had found his true calling as the leader of this small community. One day, as they were working in the province's central square, Kaito noticed a group of strangers approaching. They were dressed in armor and carried swords at their sides. Emiko caught sight of them too, and her eyes narrowed slightly. "Who are they?" she asked Kaito, her voice low and cautious. Kaito followed her gaze, his hand instinctively reaching for the hilt of his sword. "I don't know," he said, "but I think we should be prepared just in case." Emiko nodded, drawing her own sword from its scabbard. The strangers approached, their leader a tall, imposing figure with a scar above his left eyebrow. "Greetings, people of the province," the stranger said, his voice booming across the square. "I am Lord Ryota, and I come to claim this land as my own." Kaito stepped forward, Emiko by his side. "This is our land now," he said, his voice firm but controlled. "We have freed ourselves from tyranny, and we won't be taken over by anyone else." Lord Ryota sneered. "You think you can resist me?" he asked, his hand on the hilt of his own sword. "I have an army at my command, and I will not be defeated so easily." Kaito stood tall, his eyes locked on Lord Ryota's. He knew that he couldn't take on the entire army alone, but he was determined to defend this province and its people. "I'll give you a choice," Kaito said, his voice calm and measured. "You can leave peacefully, or we can settle this with our swords. The choice is yours." Lord Ryota snorted. "I will not be defeated by a single man," he said. "But I am willing to listen to your proposal. Tell me more." Kaito nodded, his mind racing with strategies and tactics. He knew that this was just the beginning of their struggles, but he was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. "Very well," Kaito said, his voice steady. "I propose a challenge. If you can defeat me in single combat, then you may claim this province as your own. But if you lose, then you and your men must leave peacefully." Lord Ryota grinned, his eyes glinting with excitement. "I accept," he said. "But I warn you, wandering samurai, I will not hold back. I will do everything in my power to emerge victorious." Kaito nodded, a cold determination settling over him. He knew that this would be the greatest challenge of his life, but he was ready to face it head on. The two men faced off, their swords drawn and ready. The fate of the province hung in the balance, and only one man would emerge victorious. As the sun began to set on the ravaged battlefield, Kaito and Lord Rauta stood facing each other, their swords still locked in a stalemate. The air was thick with tension as they circled each other, searching for an opening. Lord Rauta's men watched from the sidelines, their faces a mixture of concern and curiosity. They had never seen their lord so focused, so determined to emerge victorious. Kaito, too, was locked in his own battle, one of focus and discipline. He knew that he couldn't let Lord Rauta get the better of him, not now, when the province's fate hung precariously in the balance. The two warriors danced around each other, their blades clashing in a flurry of steel on steel. Sweat dripped from Kaito's brow as he parried Lord Rauta's attacks, his movements fluid and precise. Lord Rauta snarled, his face reddening with frustration. He had never met an opponent who could match him blow for blow, strike for strike. This wandering samurai was a formidable foe, one that would not be easily defeated. As the battle raged on, Kaito began to feel the strain. His muscles ached from the constant exertion, his breath coming in ragged gasps. But he refused to yield, driven by his determination to protect this land and its people. Lord Rauta sensed his opponents weakening and pounced, launching a series of swift and deadly attacks. Kaito stumbled backward, his sword trembling in his grasp as he struggled to keep up with the onslaught. In that moment, it seemed as though all was lost. The fate of the province hung in the balance, and Lord Rauta appeared poised to emerge victorious. But then, something within Kaito sparked. A surge of adrenaline coursed through his veins, imbuing him with a newfound strength and determination. With renewed vigor, he launched himself forward, striking back at Lord Rauta with all his might. The two warriors clashed in a frenzy of steel on steel, their blades ringing out as they exchanged blow after blow. The outcome was far from certain, but one thing was clear: only one man would emerge victorious. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the battlefield in a golden glow, Kaito and Lord Rauta stood panting, their swords still locked together. It was then that Kaito saw his chance, a small opening in Lord Rauta's defense, a fleeting moment of weakness. With lightning-quick reflexes, Kaito seized the opportunity, striking true and sending Lord Rauta's sword flying from his grasp. The lord stumbled backward, his eyes wide with surprise and shock. Kaito stood tall, his chest heaving with exhaustion, as Lord Rauta rose to his feet once more. For a moment, they locked eyes, their gazes burning with intensity. Then, with a curved bow, Kaito sheathed his sword, the silence between them speaking volumes. The fate of the province had been decided. The wandering samurai stood victorious, ready to defend this land and its people against all comers. As Lord Rauta and his men retreated in disarray, Kaito turned to face the province's leaders, who watched with a mixture of awe and gratitude. He knew that this was only the beginning of their struggles, but he was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. With a resolute determination, Kaito strode forward, his footsteps echoing through the stillness as he claimed his place among the province's leaders. The tyrant may have fallen, but a new era had begun, one in which the wandering samurai would stand tall, his sword at the ready to defend this land and its people against all who dared to threaten their freedom. As Kaito stood before the province's leaders, he felt a sense of pride and responsibility wash over him. He had defeated Lord Rauta, the tyrant who had oppressed the land for so long, but he knew that his work was far from over. The real struggle was only just beginning. The province's leaders, a mix of old men and young warriors, watched Kaito with a mixture of awe and gratitude. They had lived under Lord Rauta's rule for as long as anyone could remember, and the thought of being free from his tyranny was almost too much to bear. Kaito knew that he couldn't do this alone. He needed the support of the people, and he needed to rally them behind him if they were going to have any chance of defending their newfound freedom. "I know that Lord Rauta is gone," Kaito began, his voice carrying across the battlefield, "but I also know that his followers will not go quietly into the night. They will try to take what we have won, and it will be up to us to stop them." The leaders nodded in agreement, their faces set with determination. They knew that they had a long and difficult road ahead of them, but they were ready to face whatever challenges lay in store. As Kaito spoke, a commotion erupted at the edge of the battlefield. A group of Lord Rauta's men, led by one of his most trusted lieutenants, emerged from the trees, their swords drawn. "You will never take our land," the lieutenant spat, his eyes blazing with hatred. "We will show you what it means to cross Lord Ryota." Kaito smiled grimly, his hand on the hilt of his sword. He had expected this. The real battle was only just beginning, and he was ready. With a swift motion, Kaito drew his sword, its blade glinting in the fading light. "Let's show them what it means to cross us," he said, his voice low and deadly. The leaders of the province rallied behind him, their own swords drawn. Together, they charged forward, ready to defend their land against all comers. As they clashed with Lord Ryota's men, Kaito knew that this was just the beginning. There would be more battles to come, more challenges to overcome. But he was ready for whatever lay ahead. He had fought before, and he knew that he could do it again. The sound of clashing steel filled the air as the two forces clashed. Kaito fought with a precision and skill that left even his own followers in awe. He was a force to be reckoned with, and he would not back down. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the battlefield in darkness, Kaito stood tall, his sword still shining brightly. The province's leaders gathered around him, their faces set with determination. "We will not back down," Kaito said, his voice carrying across the battlefield. "We will fight to defend our land and our freedom. And we will win." The leaders nodded in agreement, their hearts filled with a sense of purpose and unity. They knew that they had a long and difficult road ahead of them, but they were ready to face whatever challenges lay in store. As the night wore on, the battle raged on. But Kaito stood tall, his sword shining brightly in the darkness. He was the wandering samurai, defender of the province, and he would not back down. Kaito's eyes scanned the darkening battlefield, his gaze piercing through the shadows. The clash of steel on steel still echoed through the night air, the sounds of victory and defeat mingling in a cacophony of chaos. He stood tall, his sword held high, as if beckoning the enemy to come closer. The province's leaders flanked him, their faces set with determination, their eyes burning with a fire that rivaled Kaito's own fervor. Together, they had fought off Lord Ryota's initial assault, but Kaito knew that this was only the beginning. The true test of their mettle lay ahead. As the night wore on, the battle showed no signs of abating. Kaito's men, though weary, fought with a ferocity born of desperation and loyalty. They had been freed by his blade, and they would not falter now. The enemy, too, refused to yield, their ranks swelling as more mercenaries and soldiers arrived to claim the spoils of war. Kaito's thoughts turned to Lord Ryota, that cunning and ruthless foe. Where was he? Kaito knew that the man would not miss this opportunity to strike back at his enemies. He must be planning something, scheming and plotting in the shadows. The wandering samurai's gaze narrowed as he surveyed the battlefield once more. His eyes lingered on a group of men huddled near the tree line, their faces obscured by the darkness. Something about them seemed off, too still, like statues waiting for the perfect moment to spring into action. Yet mere report, Kaito barked at his most trusted lieutenant, a grizzled veteran named Akira. "Who are those men? What are they doing out there?" Akira nodded and vanished into the night, leaving Kaito to continue commanding the battle. As the minutes ticked by, Kaito's anxiety grew. The silence from the tree line was oppressive, like a weight crushing his chest. Just as he was about to order a flanking maneuver to investigate, Akira returned, his face grim. "Lord Ryota's men, sir," he said, his voice low and urgent. "They are not just any ordinary soldiers. I've seen some of them before. They were part of Lord Ryota's personal guard." Kaito's grip on his sword tightened. This was no mere coincidence. Lord Ryota had planned this from the start, waiting for the perfect moment to strike back at Kaito and his followers. "What else?" Kaito demanded, his voice cold and calculating. "They are not alone, sir," Akira continued. "I spotted a few things lurking just beyond the tree line. I couldn't get a good look, but they seem unnatural." Kaito's eyes snapped back to the tree line, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew that Lord Ryota would stop at nothing to crush them, including calling upon dark and ancient powers. "Prepare the men," Kaito ordered, his voice low and deadly. "Well, push forward and take out the soldiers before they can do any harm." As he gave the order, the darkness seemed to grow thicker, like a living entity closing in around them. The air was heavy with anticipation, the weight of what was to come settling upon Kaito's shoulders. The wandering samurai steeled himself for the battle ahead, his sword at the ready. He would not falter now. Not when the freedom they had fought so hard to win hung precariously in the balance. With a fierce cry, Kaito charged forward, his men following close behind. The night air was filled with the clash of steel on steel, the sound of screams and shouts mingling with the darkness. The battle for their freedom had only just begun. The fight raged on, Kaito's men clashing with Lord Ryota's soldiers in a chaotic melee. The wandering samurai fought with precision and fury, his sword slicing through the enemy lines with deadly accuracy. Akira fought alongside him, her own blade flashing in the moonlight as she took down foe after foe. But amidst the chaos, Kaito sensed that something was off. The unnatural creatures lurking beyond the tree line seemed to be watching them, their presence making the air feel thick and heavy. He could almost smell the darkness emanating from them, a noxious stench that made his stomach churn. As he fought, Kaito's gaze kept drifting back to the tree line, searching for any sign of movement. And then, suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows. Tall and gaunt, with eyes that glowed like embers in the dark, it strode towards them with an unnatural gait. Kaito's grip on his sword tightened as he sensed the creature's malevolent energy. This was no ordinary foe, this was something ancient and evil, brought forth by Lord Ryota's dark magic. "Akira, get back!" Kaito yelled, trying to draw the creature away from his friend. "I'll take care of this thing." Akira hesitated for a moment before obeying, retreating to join the main battle. Kaito charged forward instead, his sword flashing in the moonlight as he faced the creature. The thing was massive, its skin like blackened tree bark and its eyes burning with an otherworldly power. Kaito could feel its gaze boring into him, trying to break his spirit. But he refused to back down, drawing on all his training and experience to face this monstrous foe. The battle raged across the clearing, the two of them exchanging blows in a flurry of steel and darkness. The air was filled with the stench of decay and death as Kaito fought for his life against this ancient evil. But even as he fought, Kaito knew that he couldn't hold out forever. Lord Ryota's dark magic was too powerful, drawing on forces beyond their comprehension. He needed a plan to defeat the creature and turn the tide of battle back in their favor. As he thought, Kaito spotted a glimmer of hope. Akira had managed to slip behind the enemy lines and was taking down soldiers left and right. If he could just hold out for a little longer. With renewed determination, Kaito launched himself at the creature once more, his sword flashing in the moonlight as he fought to buy his friend time to finish off their enemies. The battle raged on, with the outcome hanging precariously in the balance. Just when it seemed like all was lost, Akira burst back into the fray, her sword smeared with blood and her eyes blazing with determination. Together, they launched a final assault against the creature, their blades striking true as they sent it crashing to the ground. The battle may have been won, but Kaito knew that this was only the beginning. Lord Ryota's dark magic still lurked in the shadows, waiting for its chance to strike back. The wandering samurai would need all his strength and cunning to defend their freedom against the forces of darkness now gathering against them. As he stood victorious amidst the carnage, Kaito knew that his greatest challenge was yet to come. He steeled himself for what lay ahead, his sword at the ready as he prepared to face whatever terrors Lord Ryota had in store. The battle may have been won, but the war was far from over. As Kaito stood victorious amidst the carnage, he couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The creature lay still at his feet, its dark magic dissipating into the night air. But Kaito knew that this was only the beginning. Lord Ryota's influence still lingered, and Kaito had a feeling that the true battle was far from over. Akira approached him, her eyes scanning the surroundings with a mixture of caution and determination. "It's done," she said, her voice firm. "The creature is defeated." Kaito nodded, his gaze drifting to the surrounding landscape. The province was quiet, the only sound being the distant rumble of thunder on the horizon. But he knew that this peace would be short-lived. "What now?" Akira asked, her hand resting on the hilt of her sword. "We need to prepare for what's coming," Kaito replied, his mind racing with strategies and contingencies. "Lord Ryota's dark magic still lingers, and I have a feeling that he won't take kindly to being defeated." Akira's eyes narrowed. What are you saying? That we're in danger? Kaito nodded grimly. The very least. We need to gather our forces, strengthen our defenses, and prepare for the worst. Lord Ryota may not be a physical threat anymore, but his influence still resonates through this land. As they spoke, Kaito noticed that Akira's gaze kept drifting to the north, as if she expected something or someone to emerge from the shadows. He followed her line of sight, and his heart quickened in response. There, on the horizon, a procession of armor-clad warriors emerged, their banners fluttering in the wind. Kaito recognized the crest emblazoned on their shields, the mark of the neighboring Lord Shinji. Well, it seems we have our first visitor, Akira said dryly, her hand tightening around her sword hilt. Kaito's grip on his own sword relaxed slightly as he took in the sight. Let them come closer, he said, his voice even. We'll know soon enough what their intentions are. As Lord Shinji and his retinue drew near, Kaito noticed that Akira stood tall, her eyes blazing with a mix of determination and trepidation. He knew that she was thinking the same thing as him. This could be the start of something big. Lord Shinji dismounted from his horse, his face a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. Greetings, wandering samurai, he said, his voice dripping with condescension. I'm Lord Shinji, ruler of the neighboring province. I came to pay my respects, and to discuss a matter of great importance. Kaito's gaze narrowed. He knew that Lord Shinji was known for his cunning and ambition. What did he want? And what would be the cost of this visit? What is it that you wish to discuss, Lord Shinji? Kaito asked, his tone neutral. Lord Shinji smiled, a cold glint in his eye. I've come to offer my assistance and my protection. With Lord Ryota defeated, I believe it's only natural for me to take up the mantle of leadership. After all, as the strongest lord in these lands, it is my duty to maintain order. Kaito's grip on his sword tightened, his mind racing with calculations and counter-moves. This was not going to be a simple conversation. What do you propose? He asked, his voice even, but his eyes locked onto Lord Shinji's, daring him to make the wrong move. Lord Shinji's smile grew wider. I propose that we form an alliance. One where I provide the military might and protection, in exchange for your loyalty and fealty. Kaito felt a surge of adrenaline as he weighed his options. He could accept Lord Shinji's offer, but at what cost? Or he could refuse, and risk everything to maintain his independence. As he stood there, the weight of the decision settling upon him like a physical force, Kaito knew that this was only the beginning. The war may have been won, but the battle for control had just begun. Kaito's eyes never left Lord Shinji's as he deliberated on his response. He could feel the weight of the province's fate hanging in the balance, and every word counted. I appreciate your offer, Lord Shinji, Kaito said finally, his tone measured. But I must consider the well-being of my people before making any decisions. Lord Shinji's smile didn't waver. Of course, you should prioritize their needs. And that is exactly why I'm offering to help. With me at the helm, your province will flourish under my wise and just leadership. Kaito's grip on his sword remained firm as he passed Lord Shinji's words. There was a hint of arrogance in his tone, one that didn't sit well with Kaito. I'll need time to think on it, Kaito said finally, buying himself some time to consider the implications. Lord Shinji nodded, seemingly expecting as much. I give you 3 days, wandering samurai. If I don't hear from you by then, I'll take that as a refusal and make my own moves. Kaito's instincts screamed at him to refuse Lord Shinji outright, but he knew better than to underestimate the cunning lord. He needed to weigh his options carefully. As Lord Shinji departed, Kaito couldn't shake off the feeling that he was walking into a trap. The province was still reeling from the aftermath of Lord Ryota's defeat, and Kaito knew that if he didn't act quickly, the situation could spiral out of control. He spent the next few days gathering his thoughts and consulting with his trusted advisors. They were all in favor of rejecting Lord Shinji's offer, but Kaito wasn't so sure. He remembered the words of the old wise woman: a strong leader is not one who seeks power, but one who knows when to share it. As he pondered his next move, a knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. It was Akin, her eyes sparkling with news. Kato-san, I have something important to tell you, she said, her voice low and urgent. I've received word that Lord Shinji is gathering troops from neighboring provinces. He's planning to march on our land within the week. Kaito's heart sank as he processed this new information. It seemed that Lord Shinji wasn't going to wait for his answer after all. Akin, gather our scouts and riders. We need to know what we're up against, Kaito said, his mind racing with strategies and counter moves. As Akin hastened off to carry out his orders, Kaito's thoughts turned to the people of the province. They were counting on him to protect them from Lord Shinji's machinations. He knew that he had to make a decision quickly, one that would secure their future. But which way would he go? Would he accept Lord Shinji's offer and risk losing his independence, or would he reject it and face the uncertainty of war? Kaito's gaze fell upon the sword at his side, its familiar weight a reminder of the battles he had fought and won. He knew that one blade had won their freedom now. He needed to decide if it was sharp enough to defend it. The fate of the province hung in the balance, waiting for Kaito to make his move. Kaito's eyes narrowed as he watched Akin disappear into the gathering darkness, her mission to mobilize the scouts and riders clear in her purposeful stride. He took a deep breath, his mind racing with the implications of Lord Shinji's sudden move. He couldn't help but think back to the words of the old wise woman: a strong leader is not one who seeks power, but one who knows when to share it. The phrase echoed in his mind like a mantra as he weighed his options. As he stood there, lost in thought, the door slid open and Akin returned, her eyes flashing with urgency. Kaito-san, our scouts have reported back, she said, her voice low and serious. Lord Shinji's army is larger than we initially thought, with at least 1,000 men under his command. Kaito's grip on the hilt of his sword tightened instinctively as he processed this new information. He knew that they couldn't take on Lord Shinji's forces alone, not without risking devastating losses. What are our options? He asked Akin, his voice firm and resolute. We could try to negotiate with Lord Shinji, she suggested, her brow furrowed in concern. Perhaps we can find a way to compromise, or even form an alliance. Kaito snorted derisively. He knew that Lord Shinji wouldn't be interested in negotiation or compromise. The man was as cunning as a fox, and just as ruthless when it came to getting what he wanted. I don't think that's an option, Kaito said firmly. We need to prepare for war. Akin nodded, her eyes flashing with understanding. I agree, Kaito-san. But we also can't ignore the possibility of negotiating with Lord Shinji's vassals. Maybe we can find some common ground there. Kaito's gaze drifted away from Akin, his mind turning over the possibilities. He knew that they couldn't take on Lord Shinji alone, but perhaps they could find some way to split his forces or gain an advantage through diplomacy. Just then, a commotion erupted outside as a group of riders thundered into the courtyard. Kaito's instincts kicked in, and he drew his sword, his eyes scanning the crowd for any signs of danger. As the riders dismounted and approached, Kaito saw that they were from neighboring provinces, their banners bearing the marks of Lord Shinji's vassals. His grip on his sword relaxed slightly as he recognized one of the riders, a young woman named Erika, who had once been a member of Lord Shinji's personal guard. Erika approached Kaito, her eyes locked on his. Kaito-san, I've come to offer my services, she said, her voice low and urgent. I know that Lord Shinji is not one to be trusted, but I believe that you are the only one who can protect this province from him. Kaito's gaze narrowed as he considered Erika's words. He knew that she was a skilled warrior, and that her knowledge of Lord Shinji's tactics could be invaluable. I'll need more information before I make any decisions, Kaito said finally, his voice firm but open. Tell me what you know about Lord Shinji's plans. Erika nodded, her eyes flashing with understanding. As she began to speak, Kaito listened intently, his mind racing with strategies and counter moves. The fate of the province hung in the balance, waiting for Kaito to make his move. But as he stood there, listening to Erika's words, he knew that he had a decision to make, one that would change the course of history forever. As Erika finished speaking, Kaito's mind whirled with the weight of her words. He had known that Lord Shinji was cunning and ruthless, but he had not realized the extent of his plans. The province was in grave danger, and Kaito knew that he had to act quickly. He looked at Erika, her eyes locked on his as she waited for his response. I need time to think, he said finally, his voice firm but measured. Can you give me a day? 2 days? Erica nodded, her face set in determination. I'll come back tomorrow night, Kaido-san. But know that Lord Shinji is not one to be trifled with. He will stop at nothing to get what he wants. Kaido nodded grimly, his mind racing with the implications of Erica's words. He knew that he had to make a decision quickly, but he was torn between the desire for peace and the need to protect the province. As the night wore on, Kaido found himself pacing back and forth in front of the fire pit. His thoughts were consumed by Lord Shinji's plans, and the weight of responsibility hung heavy on his shoulders. But as he walked, a spark of an idea began to form in his mind. He knew that he couldn't defeat Lord Shinji alone, but what if he were to gather allies? The province was full of brave warriors, many of whom had been wronged by Lord Shinji's tyranny. Kaido stopped pacing and looked up at the stars twinkling above. He knew that it wouldn't be an easy task, but it was the only way to ensure the safety of the province. The next night, Erica returned, her eyes flashing with anticipation as she saw Kaido standing outside the gate, his sword at his side. I've been thinking, he said, his voice firm and resolute, and I believe that the best way to protect this province is to gather an army. Erica's face lit up with excitement. That's exactly what we need to do, she said, her voice full of conviction. Together, they began to make plans, gathering a small group of trusted warriors and setting out to rally the rest of the province. It wouldn't be easy, but Kaido knew that it was the only way to ensure the safety of the people he had sworn to protect. As they rode off into the night, Erica by his side, Kaido felt a sense of determination wash over him. He knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult, but he was ready for whatever lay in store. For the first time in months, he felt like the wandering samurai again, a warrior with a purpose, and a blade sharp enough to defend the people who now called him master. As the sun began to set on the horizon, Kaido and Erica led their small band of warriors into the dusty town of Akane. The streets were quiet, the only sound being the soft murmur of conversations and the clinking of teacups in a local tea house. Kaido's group had been traveling for days, gathering more allies along the way, and now they had arrived at the doorstep of their next potential recruit. Erica dismounted her horse and handed the reins to one of their companions, a young woman named Akane who was skilled with a bow. You two stay here, Erica said, looking around cautiously before focusing on Kaido. I'll go speak with Lord Tanaka. Kaido nodded, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. He knew that Lord Tanaka had always been a bit of a wild card, but he was also one of the most powerful men in the province. If they could convince him to join their cause, it would be a major blow to Lord Shinji's followers. Erica approached the local lord's mansion, her eyes scanning the surrounding area for any signs of danger. Kaido watched her go, his mind wandering back to the countless battles he had fought and won. He was no stranger to war, but this time it felt different. This time, he wasn't fighting just for himself, or even for a noble cause. He was fighting to protect the people. As Erica disappeared into the mansion, Kaido turned his attention back to their small band of warriors. They were gathered around Akane, who was busy regaling them with stories of her adventures on the road. Kaido smiled, feeling a sense of camaraderie wash over him. These people had become more than just allies, they were friends. Erica emerged from the mansion a short while later, her expression grim. Lord Tanaka is willing to meet with us, she said, but he wants to know what's in it for him. Kaido nodded. He's thinking about his own gain again, isn't he? Erica shrugged. Maybe. But we need him, Kaido. He's got more men at his disposal than we do. Kaido nodded reluctantly. Then let's go see what he has to say. The three of them approached the mansion, their footsteps echoing in the silence. Lord Tanaka was waiting for them in his study, a cup of tea steaming on the table in front of him. So, Kaido said, taking a seat across from the Lord, you are willing to join our cause? Lord Tanaka sipped his tea thoughtfully. I'm willing to listen to your proposal, he corrected. What do you plan to offer me in return for my support? Kaido leaned forward, his eyes locked on Lord Tanaka's. We'll give you control over the eastern districts, he said. You can keep the lands and the people as a reward for your loyalty. Lord Tanaka raised an eyebrow. That's not much of an offer, he said. I want more. Erica leaned forward, her eyes flashing with frustration. "We're not made of gold, Lord Tanaka. We're fighting to free our province from tyranny. We can't just hand over power without getting anything in return." Lord Tanaka chuckled. "Oh, but that's where you're wrong," he said. "You see, I've been watching the way things are going in this province, and I think it's time for a change. A new leader, with new ideas, someone who can bring prosperity back to these people." Kaido's eyes narrowed. He didn't like where this was going. "What are you saying?" he asked. Lord Tanaka leaned forward, his voice taking on a conspiratorial tone. "I'm saying that I think I'd make a better leader than Ida Lord Shinji or whoever it is you plan to put in charge once the tyrant is gone." Erika's face turned red with anger. "You're trying to take over," she accused. Lord Tanaka shrugged. "Maybe, but at least I'm being honest about my intentions." "What are yours, Kaido? Are you just going to hand power back to the people and walk away, or do you have a plan for this province's future?" Kaido felt his grip on his sword tighten. He didn't like being cornered, especially not by someone as cunning as Lord Tanaka. But he knew that they couldn't afford to alienate potential allies, at least not yet. "We'll need time to think about it," Kaido said finally, standing up and signaling for Erika to follow him out of the mansion. "We'll be back in touch soon." As they left Lord Tanaka's mansion behind, Kaido couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. He knew that Lord Tanaka was playing them, he just didn't know how much. But one thing was certain, this wasn't going to be an easy battle.